It's your luck, and luckily my luck was in yesterday. I mean, it could have gone totally another way and I wouldn't be here standing talking to you.
It's a busy Saturday afternoon at one of Britain's major airports. Families are heading off on summer holidays. The terminal is packed with nearly 4,000 people. And then, suddenly, a burning vehicle crashes through the entrance doors at full speed. This wasn't just a random act of violence. This was a culmination of a sophisticated international terrorist plot involving doctors, engineers, and a network spanning 3 continents. And yet, it was a total failure because I'm Sgt Grumpy, and after decades in law enforcement, I can tell you that some cases stick with you, not just because of what happened, but because of how ordinary people became extraordinary heroes in the space of seconds. Oh, and it happened on my old beat as well. Today, we're going deep into the Glasgow Airport attack of June the 30th, 2007. We'll examine the evidence, trace the conspiracy back to its roots, and answer the crucial question: how did a meticulously planned terrorist operation involving qualified professionals turn into such a catastrophic failure? But first, let me tell you about the baggage handler who became a legend with just 4 words.
We'll say it about you.
In the next 40 minutes, we're going to uncover the shocking discovery that this attack was connected to car bombs found in London just 36 hours earlier, bombs that were packed with over 1,800 nails designed to cause maximum casualties. We'll reveal how a network of medical professionals, doctors sworn to save lives, planned to take hundreds of them in coordinated attacks across Britain. We'll hear the incredible testimony from witnesses who didn't run away from danger, but ran straight towards it, taking on burning terrorists with nothing but their bare hands. And we'll examine the critical evidence that shows how technical incompetence saved potentially hundreds of lives, and why that matters for understanding modern terrorism. Oh, and I've got a never-before-revealed statement that might get you thinking. Stay tuned to the end. Let's start with a moment that changed everything. 3:11 p.m. on June the 30th, 2007, when a dark green Jeep Cherokee loaded with 60 litres of petrol and multiple gas canisters accelerated towards the main entrance of Glasgow Airport. The question isn't just what happened, it's why it failed so dramatically, and what we can learn from both the attack and the response. So, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's dive into one of the most thoroughly documented terrorist incidents in British history. Saturday afternoon, June the 30th, 2007. It was the first weekend of summer school holidays in Scotland. If you're planning a terrorist attack and you want maximum casualties, this is exactly when you'd strike, when airports are at their absolute busiest. Glasgow Airport was packed, nearly 4,000 people in the terminal building. Families with children, elderly passengers, tourists, people going on business, all the soft targets that terrorists specifically choose. At 3:11 p.m. precisely, security cameras captured a dark green Jeep Cherokee with the registration Lima 808 Romeo Delta Tango approaching the main terminal entrance. The vehicle was travelling at approximately 30 miles per hour, fast enough to cause serious damage, but slow enough to maintain control. And this is where my law enforcement background kicks in. Most people focus on the dramatic aspects of what happened next. But as investigators, we need to look at the evidence systematically. The vehicle struck the security bollards that are positioned outside the main entrance doors. Now, these aren't sophisticated anti-terrorism barriers. This was 2007. Nobody'd ever done this before in the UK. These were just basic concrete posts designed to prevent accidental vehicle contact with the building. But they became the single most important factor in preventing mass casualties. When the Jeep hit those bollards, several things happened simultaneously. The vehicle failed to penetrate the building, and that was crucial in preventing mass casualties. The impact failed to detonate the explosive device inside the vehicle, and we'll come back to why that's crucial. The driver, later identified as Kafil Ahmed, doused himself in petrol and set himself ablaze. The passenger, Bilal Abdullah, began throwing petrol bombs from inside the vehicle. And here's what the security footage shows that most people don't realise. Ahmed, despite being completely engulfed in flames, was still trying to get out and access the boot of the vehicle where additional explosive materials were stored. This wasn't a man in a panic. This was someone following a predetermined plan, even while he was burning alive. The technical analysis of this device that he was trying to trigger is absolutely critical, understanding why this attack failed. The Jeep was loaded with 60 litres of petrol, multiple propane gas canisters, these are typically used for outdoor heating, and various improvised explosive components. In the right circumstances, this could have created a devastating fuel-air explosion. But, and this is crucial, the device lacked a proper oxidizer. Without going into too much technical detail, this fundamental flaw meant that no matter how many times they tried to detonate it, including attempts to trigger it remotely using mobile phone signals, it simply could not explode. Now, imagine you're a civilian in that terminal. You hear explosions, you see flames, you see a man on fire trying to get to more explosive materials. What do? Most people would run. Most people should run. That's a sensible, rational response. But some people, and this is where this case becomes truly extraordinary, some people ran towards the danger. Coming up, we'll examine exactly who these people were, what they did, and how their split-second decisions changed the entire outcome of this terrorist attack. But first, I need to tell you about the connection that investigators discovered. A connection that turned us from a single incident into part of a much larger international conspiracy. Here's what the public didn't know at the time. The Glasgow attack wasn't an isolated incident. It was the final act of a coordinated terrorist operation that had begun in London 36 hours earlier. On June the 29th, 2007, the day before Glasgow, 2 car bombs were discovered in London's West End. Not detonated, discovered. And when you examine the evidence from both scenes, the connections become unmistakable. Let me walk you through what happened in London, because understanding this sequence is crucial to understanding the Glasgow attack. At 1:30 a.m. on June the 29th, ambulance crew members were responding to a routine call outside the Tiger nightclub in Haymarket. This venue was packed, over 550 people inside. The crew noticed suspicious vapours coming from a green Mercedes-Benz parked nearby. When bomb disposal experts examined the vehicle, they found 60 litres of petrol, gas cylinders, and over 800 nails. 800 nails? These weren't there by accident. They were specifically positioned to create shrapnel in an explosion. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The bomb disposal team found mobile phones with the device, and call analysis showed multiple calls to those phones. Someone had been trying to detonate this device remotely, and it had failed. A few hours later, a second Mercedes-Benz was found in nearby Cockspur Street. This one had been illegally parked and towed to a car pound on Park Lane. The car pound staff noticed strong petrol fumes, and after hearing about the first device, alerted police. This second vehicle contained over 1,000 nails and the same type of improvised explosive components that were found in the first car. Now, technical analysis of both London devices revealed the same critical flaw that we found at Glasgow: faulty construction and the absence of proper oxidising agents. These weren't random failures, these were systematic design flaws that suggest that the same bomb maker was responsible for all 3 devices. CCTV footage from London showed the perpetrators conducting reconnaissance and parking both vehicles in the early hours of June the 29th. Mobile phone records tracked the suspects' movements and communications in the hours leading up to Glasgow. When investigators cross-referenced this evidence with the Glasgow attack, they found something remarkable. Receipts from B&Q hardware stores showing purchases of nails and other bomb-making components by Kafil Ahmed. That was the man who would drive the burning Jeep into Glasgow Airport less than 2 days later. But here's what really tells you about the sophistication of this operation. The timing wasn't random. The London attacks were timed for maximum casualties at entertainment venues. The Glasgow attack was timed for maximum casualty during holiday travel. These were coordinated strikes designed to cause mass casualties and maximum psychological impact to the civilian population. The only reason they failed was technical incompetence. So, we're not dealing with a lone wolf attack or a spur-of-the-moment decision. We're looking at a coordinated terrorist operation involving multiple locations, multiple vehicles, and careful timing. The question becomes, who were these people, and how did qualified professionals end up planning mass murder? Coming up, we'll dive deep into the backgrounds of the perpetrators, and I'll tell you, their profiles will surprise you, but first, let me tell you about the moment when ordinary citizens became heroes and how a baggage handler's response to terrorism became the stuff of legend. At 3:11 p.m, when that Jeep Cherokee struck the bollards and burst into flames, the normal human response would be to run away from the danger. Flight, not fight. Basic survival instinct. But what happened at Glasgow Airport that day defies normal human behaviour. And as someone who's spent decades in law enforcement, I can tell you that what these civilians did was extraordinary by any measure. Let me introduce you to the people who changed the course of this terrorist attack. John Smeaton was a 31-year-old baggage handler who had stepped outside for a cigarette break. When he heard the explosions, instead of taking cover, he ran directly towards the burning vehicle. He saw Kafil Ahmed, completely engulfed in flames, trying to access the boot of the Jeep, where additional explosive materials were stored. Now remember, Ahmed was on fire, potentially armed, and trying to reach more explosive devices. Any rational person would keep their distance. But Smeaton didn't think, he acted. He delivered a powerful kick that physically stopped Ahmed from reaching the boot, an action that later tore a tendon in his own foot. But Smeaton wasn't alone. Stephen Clarkson was at the airport collecting family members when the attack began. Watching Ahmed continue to resist police, despite being doused with fire extinguishers, Clarkson charged forward and used what he later modestly described as a wee forearm smash to bring Ahmed to the ground so police could handcuff him. Here's what's remarkable about Clarkson. He kept his identity secret for 10 weeks after the attack. He even returned to work the next day as if nothing had happened. Tells you something about his character. Alex McIlveen was a taxi driver who just dropped off a fare. He saw police officers struggling with Bilal Abdullah and immediately ran to assist. Despite being temporarily blinded by gas the police had deployed, McIlveen continued helping to restrain Abdullah and then assisted in moving other injured civilians to safety. Michael Kerr was returning from holiday with his family. He was already outside the airport, already safe, when he chose to run back towards the attackers. He exchanged punches with one of the terrorists. He lost several teeth, and his leg was broken before other civilians dragged him to safety. Henry Lambie, a retired firefighter, he grabbed fire extinguishers and battled both the vehicle fire and the flames on Ahmed. Stuart Ferguson, an off-duty police officer, prioritised preserving life, even the attacker's life, by continuing to douse Ahmed with extinguishers. Now, from an investigative standpoint, what's fascinating is how quickly these individuals made life or death decisions. We're talking split-second assessments in a chaotic, dangerous situation where the wrong choice could mean death. But they all made the same choice, engaged the threat directly. This isn't just heroism, it's tactically sound. By immediately engaging the attackers, these civilians prevented them from accessing additional explosive materials. It disrupted their operational plan, and it quite possibly saved hundreds of lives. The witness statements from these individuals provide crucial evidence about the attackers' behaviour and intentions. Ahmed's persistence in trying to reach the boat while on fire suggests this was a planned contingency. He had specific ideas to access those materials if the initial device failed. Abdullah's actions inside the vehicle, continuing to throw petrol bombs even as the situation deteriorated, shows this wasn't a panic response but a predetermined plan being executed under extreme stress. The fact that both attackers continued following their operational plan even when seriously injured or on fire tells us something important about their level of commitment and possible training. 7 of these civilians later received formal recognition through the British Honours System. John Smeaton received the Queen's Gallantry Medal. 6 others received the Queen's Commendation for Bravery. And here's what I find most impressive. Most of them didn't want recognition. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They saw themselves as people who did what needed to be done. The actions of these civilians raises a crucial question. What would have happened if they hadn't intervened? The technical evidence suggests that while the main explosive device could not detonate, Ahmed was trying to access additional materials that could have caused secondary explosions or fires. But to understand why this attack was planned in the first place, we need to examine who these attackers were. And I'll tell you, their backgrounds will challenge everything you think you know about terrorist profiles. The shocking story of how these medical professional people sworn to save lives ended up planning to take hundreds of them. When most people think about terrorists, they picture uneducated extremists, social outcasts, people with nothing to lose. The Glasgow Airport attackers shatter that stereotype completely. We're talking about doctors and engineers, people with advanced degrees, successful careers, and bright futures. People who had taken oaths to preserve life, not destroy it. Let me introduce you to the men who planned this mass murder. Bilal Abdullah was 29 years old, born in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire, a British citizen, but raised in Iraq during his childhood before returning to the UK for his medical education. He was working as a locum diabetes specialist at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley. Think about that for a moment. This man was treating diabetic patients, people whose lives literally depended on his medical expertise, while simultaneously planning to kill hundreds of innocent civilians. During his trial, Abdullah admitted to being a terrorist, as defined by UK law, but claimed he intended to frighten people rather than murder them. The evidence, however, that tells us a completely different story. The timing and location of the attacks, during peak hours in crowded areas, that demonstrates clear murderous intent. The inclusion of over 1,800 nails across both London devices wasn't designed to frighten people, it was designed to kill, to maim, to injure. Abdullah's medical credentials and British nationality allowed him to operate with minimal suspicion. He had legitimate access to hospitals, legitimate reasons to travel, and the kind of professional background that doesn't typically raise red flags in security screening. This highlights a crucial vulnerability in our security systems. How do you identify threats from people who on paper look like model citizens? Kafil Ahmed was even more qualified. Born January the 1st, 1979 in India, raised in Saudi Arabia by Dr. Pear. He had earned the degrees in mechanical engineering from India and aeronautical engineering from Queen's University, Belfast. He was pursuing a PhD in computational fluid dynamics at Anglia Ruskin University. This wasn't some basement bomb maker following internet instructions. This was an aeronautical engineer with advanced knowledge of physics, chemistry, and material science. The digital forensics in this case are absolutely crucial. Ahmed's computer hard drive, which he'd entrusted to his mother before departing for Britain, contained bomb-making instructions downloaded from extremist websites. Jihadist propaganda, speeches by Osama bin Laden, and graphic footage from conflict zones in Chechnya, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Mobile phone records showed that Ahmed maintained frequent contact with individuals in Malta, the UK, Finland, Saudi Arabia, and Oman during his 2005 to 2007 stay in India. These communications suggest a broader network of support and coordination. So how does an aeronautical engineer pursuing a PhD become a terrorist willing to set himself on fire for his cause? The evidence suggests that Ahmed's radicalization occurred during his academic career. He consumed hours of extremist content. He developed an obsession with perceived Western oppression of Muslims and became convinced that violence was not just justified, but necessary. Abdullah's radicalization appears to have been motivated by British involvement in Iraq and what he saw as systematic oppression of Muslims worldwide. His medical work in a British hospital didn't moderate these views. If anything, it may have intensified his sense of operating behind enemy lines. Abdullah and Ahmed first made contact in February 2007, meeting through mutual connections in the extremist community. Evidence suggests they may have encountered each other at Cambridge University, where both had academic connections. Their partnership combined Abdullah's medical access and British credentials with Ahmed's engineering expertise and bomb-making knowledge. This wasn't a random pairing, it was a strategic alliance designed to maximise operational capability. The investigation quickly revealed this wasn't just a two-man operation. Within hours of the Glasgow attack, 8 people were in custody across multiple countries. Dr. Mohammed Hanif, a 27-year-old Indian doctor working at Gold Coast Hospital in Australia, was arrested at Brisbane Airport while attempting to board a one-way flight to India. His connection stemmed from his relationship with the Ahmed brothers. Mohammed Asha, a 28-year-old Jordanian neurosurgeon working at Royal Shrewsbury Hospital, was arrested along with his wife on the M6 motorway. Asha had provided financial assistance to Abdullah, which prosecutors argued constituted funding for terrorism. Sabil Ahmed, Kafil's younger brother, was initially arrested for failing to disclose information about the plot, and then deported to India in 2007. But the story doesn't end there. In 2020, 13 years later, Sabil was arrested by India's National Investigation Agency after being deported from Saudi Arabia, accused of involvement in an alleged Lashkar-e-Taiba recruitment plot. LET is a Pakistan-based terrorist organisation associated with Al-Qaeda and has been a prolific supporter of terrorism. This demonstrates the long-term international ramifications of terrorist networks. These connections don't just disappear when an attack fails. They metastasise across borders and through time. What makes this case so significant from an investigative standpoint is how it challenges our assumptions about terrorist profiles. These weren't marginalised individuals with nothing to lose. They were successful professionals with everything to gain from peaceful, productive lives. Yet they chose terrorism. Coming up, we'll examine the international investigation that followed, and I'll show you how this case connected to terror networks spanning 3 continents. But first, let me tell you about the technical failures that saved hundreds of lives, and what they tell us about the evolution of terrorist tactics. Within hours of the Glasgow attack, one of the most sophisticated international terrorism investigations in British history was underway, and the evidence trail it uncovered reveals just how close this conspiracy came to succeeding. Let me walk you through how investigators pieced this together, because the methodology tells us as much about modern counter-terrorism as the attack itself. The first crucial breakthrough came from technical analysis of the explosive devices. Bomb disposal experts examining both the London and Glasgow devices found identical construction flaws, improper oxidizer ratios, faulty detonation systems, and amateur-level assembly despite sophisticated planning. This wasn't random incompetence, it was systematic technical failure. The same person had built all three devices, and that person had made the same critical mistake in each case. Mobile phone forensics revealed attempted remote detonations. The phones recovered with the London devices showed multiple incoming calls from numbers traced to the Glasgow conspirators. Someone had been so desperately trying to trigger these bombs remotely, and the devices had just failed to respond. Luckily for us. CCTV footage from London provided a detailed timeline of the conspiracy. Cameras captured the perpetrators conducting reconnaissance missions in the West End, selecting targets based on crowd density and escape routes. The footage shows methodical professional planning. These weren't spontaneous attacks. They were carefully coordinated operations with backup plans and contingency procedures. Financial investigators traced money transfers between the conspirators and the international networks. Bank records showed funds moving from the Middle East through European accounts to British banks, funding everything from the vehicle purchases to the bomb-making materials. The financial trail revealed something crucial. This operation was externally funded. These weren't lone wolves using their own resources. They were part of a broader network with significant financial backing. The investigation quickly expanded beyond Britain's borders. By July the 3rd, 2007, 8 people were in custody across 3 countries. In Australia, Dr. Mohammed Hanif's arrest at Brisbane Airport revealed connections stretching from Britain to the Indian subcontinent. His attempted departure on a one-way ticket suggested advanced knowledge of the operation's timing. The Hanif case illustrates both the international scope of the investigation and its limitations. Despite his connections to the Ahmed brothers, charges against him were eventually dropped. This highlights the difference between suspicious associations and proving criminal culpability. What emerged from the investigation was particularly disturbing, though. A network of medical professionals with legitimate access to sensitive facilities, legitimate reasons to travel internationally, and the kind of professional credentials that don't typically raise security flags. Mohammed Asha's case is particularly significant. As a neurosurgeon at Royal Shrewsbury Hospital, he had access to restricted areas, dangerous materials, and detailed knowledge of hospital security procedures, while ultimately acquitted of terrorism charges. His involvement shows how terrorists were targeting the medical profession for recruitment. The investigation also revealed significant intelligence gaps. Neither Abdullah nor Ahmed had been identified as subjects of interest by security services prior to the attacks, although they were known. Both had clean backgrounds, legitimate employment, and no obvious red flags in their profiles. This highlights a fundamental challenge in counter-terrorism. How do you identify threats from people who appear to be model citizens until the moment they attempt mass murder? Audio recordings released in October 2008 provided crucial context. Abu Hamza al-Mahar, Minister of War for the Islamic State of Iraq, claimed responsibility for the last operation in Britain. In these recordings distributed by Al-Furqan Institute for Media Production. A text message sent by Kafil Ahmed to his brother Sabil just before the attack, directing him to check an email account, suggested pre-planned communications with international handlers. Abdullah had addressed his will to Abu Omar al-Baghdadi and Abu Hamza al-Mahar, senior figures in Al-Qaeda in Iraq, indicating ideological alignment with international terrorist organisations. Digital forensics proved crucial. Ahmed's computer contained not just bomb-making instructions, but detailed operational planning documents, target reconnaissance notes, and communications with international contacts. Phone records revealed a complex web of international communications in the months leading up to the attacks, with contacts in Malta, Finland, Saudi Arabia, and Oman, suggesting a broader support network. Abdullah's trial at Woolwich Crown Court in December 2008 provided additional evidence about the conspiracy's scope and intent. Mr. Justice Mackay's sentencing remarks described Abdullah as a religious extremist and a bigot who posed a continuing danger to public safety. The judge emphasised the premeditated nature of the attacks and Abdullah's murderous intent, evidenced by the obstruction of safety mechanisms on gas cylinders and the inclusion of over 1,800 nails designed to maximise casualties. Ahmed was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 32 years. His co-conspiracist, with 90% degree burns to his entire body, died 5 days after the attack in Glasgow Royal Infirmary Burns Unit. The case of Sabil Ahmed demonstrates the investigation's long-term implications. His 2020 arrest in India, 13 years after his brother's attack, shows how terrorist networks evolve and persist across borders and through time. His alleged involvement with Lashkar-e-Taiba recruitment suggests that Glasgow conspiracy connected to multiple international terrorist organisations, creating ongoing security concerns across multiple countries. What this investigation reveals is the increasingly international nature of terrorism. This wasn't a domestic plot, it was a multinational conspiracy with connections spanning from Iraq to Australia, from medical schools to terrorist training camps. The sophistication of the planning, combined with the fundamental technical failures, shows both the evolution of terrorist capabilities and their persistent limitations. Coming up, we'll briefly examine the long-term impact of this attack on security policies worldwide and explain why the lessons learned from this failed attack may have prevented countless casualties in subsequent years. The Glasgow Airport attack was, by any objective measure, a failure. No civilians died from the attack itself. The explosive devices didn't detonate. The attackers were either killed or captured within minutes. But here's what makes the case so significant. The failed attack fundamentally changed how we think about terrorism, how we think about airport security, and civilian response to extreme situations. Within hours of the attack, vehicles were banned from the immediate vicinity of terminal buildings across the UK. Concrete barriers and steel bollards were installed at airports internationally. The entire concept of landside airport security was revolutionised. Prior to Glasgow, airport security focused primarily on airside areas, protecting the aircraft and the passengers after security screening. The attack demonstrated that terminals themselves were vulnerable targets with potentially devastating consequences. Gordon Dewar, who was Glasgow's airport's managing director in 2007, later explained that post-attack security improvements focused on making airports very unattractive targets, where attackers would likely be caught and might even lose their own life. This represented a fundamental shift from reactive to proactive security planning. The attacks led to comprehensive reviews of security at railway stations, ports and other crowded places across the UK. Lord West's review identified over 250 railway stations requiring enhanced security measures. New guidance was issued to thousands of cinemas, theatres, restaurants and other venues, providing detailed advice on improving resilience against vehicle bomb attacks through better physical protection and enhanced vigilance. The Glasgow attack represented the first use of a vehicle as a weapon in a UK terrorist incident, predating the wave of vehicle ramming attacks that would plague European cities in subsequent years. Detective Superintendent David Swindle, who led the investigation, noted the attack's historical significance as the first of its kind, observing sadly that since then we've seen so many acts like this. The attack's methodology, using readily available vehicles as weapons rather than complex explosive devices, required minimal technical expertise compared to traditional bomb making, making it accessible to a broader range of potential attackers. The involvement of multiple healthcare professionals prompted significant reviews of NHS employment procedures and security vetting. The case highlighted the challenge of balancing thorough background checks with the NHS's reliance on overseas trained doctors. While NHS employers defended existing procedures as appropriately rigorous, the attacks demonstrated that professional credentials and clean backgrounds don't necessarily prevent radicalisation. Perhaps the attack's most significant legacy lies in demonstrating the power of civilian response to terrorism. The heroic actions of ordinary people at Glasgow Airport became a template for community resilience against extremist violence. The incident showed that effective counter-terrorism requires not just professional security services, but vigilant and courageous citizens willing to act in crisis situations. John Smeaton's response in particular became an international symbol of defiance against terrorism, inspiring others to take decisive action in similar situations.
They try and come to Britain and they'll try and disrupt us any way they want, but the British people have been under a lot more things than this, and we always stand proud. And then you come to Glasgow, Glasgow doesn't accept us, do you know what I mean? This is Glasgow, so we'll set about you, that's it.
The case provided crucial insights into radicalisation patterns among educated professionals. The involvement of doctors and engineers challenged assumptions about terrorist profiles, and it highlighted the need for enhanced vigilance across all sectors of society. The evidence of online radicalisation, international networking, and gradual ideological drift demonstrated how extremist recruitment had evolved in the internet age. Abdullah's life sentence, with a minimum term of 32 years, sent a clear message about the consequences of terrorism, while Ash's acquittal demonstrated the justice system's ability to distinguish between suspicious associations and criminal culpability. Kafil Ahmed's death from his injuries eliminated the possibility of gathering intelligence through interrogation, but his digital footprint provided extensive evidence about the conspiracy's international connections. 17 years later, the attack remains relevant as vehicle ramming has become a common terrorist tactic worldwide. The security measures implemented in response to Glasgow have undoubtedly prevented countless casualties in subsequent incidents. The investigation techniques developed during this case, particularly the integration of digital forensics, international intelligence sharing, and technical bomb analysis, have become standard practice in counter-terrorism operations. From an investigative standpoint, the Glasgow Airport attack represents a perfect case study in both terrorist methodology and counter-terrorism response. It shows how sophisticated planning can be undermined by technical incompetence, how professional credentials can mask extremist intentions, and how civilian courage can change the outcome of terrorist attack. The attack failed because of concrete bollards, technical incompetence, and extraordinary civilian bravery, but its impact succeeded in transforming security consciousness, international cooperation, and community resilience against terrorism. MI5 don't go blameless here, because these people were known to them, and they had been known to have contact with higher level terrorists. But they had been disregarded as fringe players and not really involved. MI5 should have learned a lesson from this, and I hope they did. And what strikes me most about this case, after examining all the evidence, is how many factors had to align for this attack to fail as completely as it did. Change any one element: better bomb construction, different timing, less heroic civilians, and we could have been looking at hundreds of casualties. The Glasgow Airport attack reminds us that terrorism's greatest weakness isn't just poor planning or technical incompetence. It's the fact that most people, when faced with evil, choose to fight back rather than flee. And that's the real lesson from June the 30th, 2007. Not that terrorism can be defeated by concrete barriers or security screening, but that it can be defeated by ordinary people making extraordinary choices in impossible circumstances. And that's a lesson worth remembering, no matter where you are or what threats you might face. Oh, one more thing. I heard at the time through my contacts in the force that Glasgow Airport became a target of opportunity as the perpetrators had realised the net was closing in on them after the failure of the London attack. While I cannot substantiate this, it begs the question, if true, what was the real target to be? And remember, that vehicle had remote detonation in it. They didn't intend to go out in a blaze of glory. Until next time, it's been Sgt Grumpy reminding you to stay vigilant, stay informed, and never underestimate the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Stay safe out there.